Welcome to the Mama Thrive podcast. I'm Kendra Blake, and I'm so glad you are here. I believe that motherhood is far more than a life stage to survive. It is a profound rite of passage, a developmental transition that reshapes identity, values, relationships, and the nervous system itself. And when motherhood is properly understood and compassionately supported, it can become a powerful catalyst for self-discovery, meaning, and reclamation. This podcast is grounded in what I now call the reclaimed motherhood method, a compassion-led framework that honors the emotional, embodied, and identity-shifting realities of becoming a mother, rather than asking women to simply cope, push through, or perform motherhood better. Every fortnight, I'm joined in thoughtful, honest conversation by mothers and the professionals who support them, therapists, doulas, clinicians, coaches, and practitioners, as we explore what it truly means to be inside the work of motherhood and to support mothers in ways that are ethical, embodied, and sustainable. My intention with this podcast is to create a space where we talk about motherhood differently, a space for growth-orientated mothers and those who walk alongside them, who sense that there is more beneath the surface, more nuance, more truth, more permission to slow down, feel deeply, and reconnect with who they are becoming. Mama Thrive is an invitation to step away from perfection, productivity, and self-abandonment, and towards a motherhood that is more connected, compassionate, and consciously lived. Because within the challenges of modern motherhood lies not just the possibility of coping, but the opportunity to reclaim, to integrate, and to thrive with purpose. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mama Thrive. I'm honoured to be joined today by Lucy Wylde, a coach, matrescence activist, and self-advocacy specialist, dedicated to helping women and mothers thrive, not just survive. Lucy's work bridges the physical and emotional layers of motherhood, blending coaching, movement, yoga, postnatal well-being, and embodied practice to help women tune into their bodies, desires, and inner truth, rather than their cultural shoulds. She's a perinatal well-being specialist with almost 2 decades of experience in movement and well-being, including personal training, yoga, teaching, pregnancy and postnatal exercise, and trauma-informed support. Lucy is also a proud solo mama and a business owner and a passionate advocate for naming and understanding matrescence. Her mission is simple but powerful: to help women uncover their inner strength, build resilience, claim their worth, and step fully into their lives with clarity, self-trust, and joy. Welcome, Lucy. It is an absolute pleasure to have you. Hi, Lucy. It's really amazing and wonderful to welcome you to Mama Thrive. Thank you for making the time to join me today.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me, Kendra. It's a real pleasure.
So I'm going to jump right into the way that I always start these calls, just so that we can put a name to a face and a background to you, if that's okay. Could you tell us a little bit about you, Lucy, and what it is that you do in the world of mother care support?
Yeah, sure. So I am a self-advocacy coach, and I've moved to that title in the last few months because I realised at the root of everything I was doing, really that's what it was about. My specialism is in perinatal well-being. I do work with people who aren't mums, work with women who aren't mums, but my passion really is in the motherhood space because of my own experience, whether that's having experienced birth trauma, having experienced domestic abuse, having experienced the ups and downs of matrescence, and then learning more about matrescence and my own experience. It's been and is incredible to support people to know more about themselves and their body. And I do that via coaching, via yoga, teaching, via fitness, if needs be. Fitness is sort of more in my past now, and I've moved more into coaching, but the body work is still very much part of what I do, even if it's just breath work, really.
I think that body piece is so essential, actually, especially for women in the very patriarchal society that makes us really disconnect from our sense of selves. Totally. So actually, that really gives me a beautiful place to land. When we speak about this idea of self-advocacy and the work that you do in helping women tune into their bodies and their desires rather than their shoulds, could you tell me a little bit about what this looked like for you personally when you first became a mother, Lucy?
Yes, absolutely. So let's go back to, you said when I first became a mum. Yeah, so I definitely was a people pleaser. I would describe myself as a former people pleaser, or maybe a recovering people pleaser. And I didn't know myself very well. And I thought I did. Like, it's funny because I was very in tune with my body, and I was very surprised that birth went the way it did. I found birth very traumatic because it went totally different to how I planned. I was in labour for 5 days, ended with an emergency C-section, and they cut my bladder and all of that. But I thought I knew myself back then, 12 years ago roughly. But over the 11 and a bit years of motherhood, I've experienced such a huge identity shift, which is natural because of matrescence, but also getting to know myself after being treated like shit by certain people, and also just really learning what I will and won't stand for, what I do and don't want in life, and what I do and don't want in my energy. So I protect my boundaries massively. That's partly why I came to the self-advocacy title, because boundaries is something that I talk about with nearly every one-to-one client. Well, yeah, probably everyone really, because it always comes into something. And then speaking up for ourselves, because I find that we can have the feelings of what we do and don't want, but people can struggle to convey those things. And I think it's taken me the life experience that I've been through to grow what I would describe as the very strong root, so that I feel connected to my truth. I'm able to convey what I mean in a calm, assertive manner, as opposed to losing my shit and being angry and shouting it. And I've found working with people that it's there that people struggle. Like, they have the feelings and the truth is surfacing in some way, but the way to get it out of their mouth in a way that is landing okay with others is the mission, really.
I can really imagine that so many women listening can really see themselves in what you've brought there, Lucy. The sense of being the ultimate people pleaser. Finding motherhood throws this absolute curveball where suddenly you realize that if you self-neglect, it's really hard to give from an empty cup. And you use the word matrescence, and it's something that I come back to often within this podcast. Matrescence is so invisible culturally, isn't it? As profound, if not more profound than adolescence, dare I say that? That might be controversial. What are the signs mums often miss because society doesn't talk about it? This experience, this developmental transition, matrescence.
Oh, that's such a great question. Gave me goosebumps. What are the signs that they miss? They miss the ability to say how they feel. Because I just picture like a former version of myself, and then numerous people I've had, whether it's one-to-one or in my baby massage classes, who've wanted to say how they feel, whether it's down to, no, I'd like to have my baby back, you know, say mum or mother-in-law comes over to look after the baby, and for whatever reason the mum wants her baby back in her arms, and the mum or mother-in-law goes, no, I'll take them for a wander. And it's like, no, please listen to me. You know, so even just the ability to say, please listen to what I've just said, as opposed to, no, I'm just going to quietly cry or keep my feelings to myself. It's all of those little things that aren't really little. You know, the ability to say how, I don't know whether you do or don't want to sleep train your little one. You know, that was definitely a clash that I had with my daughter's dad. And I couldn't speak up until it got to a point where I was like, no. I mean, I was feeling physically unwell and sobbing in the other room whilst he tried to sleep train her. And that was my body going, no, we're not doing this anymore. But it had to get to a desperate point. Like, the former version of me had to get to very upset and very angry before I said anything. And I know where that comes from. My mum's still not great to this day at saying how she feels unless it's in a strop. But for me, I love being assertive and calm in the way I'm able to say things. But yeah, like I say, I see it in women all the time. They feel like they should be more grateful, constantly thinking that they should be grateful, and they can't moan, and they're worried about being accused of being angry or ungrateful. And it's not the case at all. I like to reassure them. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Lucy, I think some of the signs that we miss that we are really in this process of becoming is when we feel these edges and we don't necessarily know how to traverse them as women and mothers. Yeah. It's interesting that you brought in that piece around how your body responded when your edges were met and you didn't know how to assert yourself in that space, or it felt unsafe to do so, because that's such a significant part of your work, isn't it? Being able to work with both this idea of your body and then the belief process around it, so the coaching piece. How would you say the body informs emotional processing and identity shifts in motherhood? That's another big question, putting you right on the spot there. I love it. It's a great question. Please, can you say it again? Yeah, of course. How would you say the body informs
emotional processing and identity shifts in motherhood?
Well, through my own experience and some research, I have learned that our relationship with our body varies. Everybody will have, say, a spectrum of connection with their body. Mine is pretty close, intense, not sure quite what the word is, but I have a deep, deep connection with my body. After a huge load of trauma, basically, to learn, I have had to learn my worth. I've had to learn that I matter. I've had to listen to my body after having burnout and having been very, very unwell. And this was my body telling me to stop, giving me massive warning signals. So it's possible that, I'm just thinking of like the listeners hearing what I'm saying, it's possible that your mind-body connection isn't particularly strong. Like I'll sometimes say to people in my yoga classes, how do you feel that? Where do you feel that? And sometimes they struggle to say, and I'm like, that's okay. It is a journey. And to me, it's not something to measure like you're good or bad at connecting with your body, but it's just one of those things to pay attention to, what sensations and what emotions are coming up. And for me, I think part of it is validating myself as a highly sensitive person. I found out probably about 8 years ago that I think I'm an HSP. And ever since then, bit by bit, I've kind of owned it and grown into it a bit more. So I now know that I do feel things very deeply. Like I was crying at my boyfriend's dad's funeral recently, and he said to me, maybe later that day, I love that you feel so much. Like I was crying more than his family, which might be hilarious for some people, but I just found the organ music so moving. And I think I'm what you call a bittersweet temperament, which there's a book called Bittersweet. Susan Cain, I think, is the author. And when I learned about that, that really made sense to me, because I do feel, yeah, as I say, whether it's moving music or a beautiful scene or a dance piece often moves me to tears and that kind of thing. But coming back to your question, yeah, so our relationship with our body can be deeper or not so deep, but I think it takes practice to listen in to what your body might be saying, and then to realise whether it's grief or anger or joy, because all of these things can be what your body is saying, let's say. Does that make sense?
It does. And I suppose if I'm thinking a little bit about the threads that have been coming through already in our conversation, this idea of potentially being the all-time people pleaser that so many women tend to be when they step into motherhood, there is a tendency to suppress, ignore, dismiss our body signals, because you can't people please if you are constantly attuning to yourself, because you need to be attuned to somebody else in the process. And I suppose in part what I may be hearing from you, Lucy, is that the moment you are able to slow things down and tap into learning how to hear what your body's saying, that's when you're able to fully acknowledge the emotional depth or experience that you're going through. And it's beautiful what you're saying around this recognition that I suppose everybody has different temperaments. I would also say I'm a highly sensitive person, and I definitely can see and experience that in relationships where I find others to be a little less connected with their emotions or their bodies in the kind of intensity as I am. And I wonder about that experience in motherhood and matrescence being something that tends to be evoked or made to be even more kind of exponential by virtue of the changes and experiences that we go through as mothers. And maybe with that in mind, I'm thinking a little bit about how you would support somebody who is starting to learn to tap into their own bodies and their own innate wisdom. I mean, you've alluded to it a little bit in what you shared around the yoga class, but it feels like a pivotal piece around getting to know yourself and your experience of matrescence as a woman. And
Yeah, definitely. And I've toyed with calling myself a body literacy coach as well, you know, and it really is kind of tricky if I were to choose between the two. At the moment, it's self-advocacy, but the two are very, very intertwined, self-advocacy and body literacy. And body literacy, I feel, is a term that isn't massively known about, but I absolutely adore it, because it is really just your ability to read your body's signals. And the book I'm reading, called Body Full of Stars by Molly Caro May, which is about motherhood. Do you know it?
No, but the title's just gorgeous.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah, she talks about body fluency, and I was like, oh, I love it. She's talking my language. Yeah, but it really, I'm just trying to think what your question was. Yeah, can you remind me what your question was?
I mean, you're going on a beautiful trail there, Lucy, and I completely interrupted.
No, it's fine.
I suppose what I was Curious around is like, how would you support a woman who is getting to know their body through the process of matrescence?
Yes, lovely. Thank you for leading me back to that. Yeah, so, and I think it makes sense to share that, like, I've been working in fitness, health and well-being for about 20 years now. And so my work as a coach came from a physical background, and I did my degree in dance. So I've been a body person for a long while, and that's my profession. But also as a person, I love to write poetry and to tune into my emotions in all sorts of different ways. I'm absolutely in love with dance. And so that's another way of feeling and conveying emotions, but working with women to help them connect with their body and read what they may be feeling. We really start with hands on their center. She puts her hands on her center, ideally under clothing, but if that feels too vulnerable, maybe on top. And that's to feel the breath and to hear the breath, and to notice the pace and the depth and the sound of your breath is just the most beautiful thing. I think it's this way to be intimate with ourselves, and it's so lovely to feel that life force that we can take for granted. And that's really where it begins. And that can be huge in itself. So hands on the body. And then if it's not, well, beyond listening to the breath and feeling the rise and fall of that simple thing that we witness in our babies, right? Like, I don't know if you remember your little ones, but I just remember watching Tilly's belly, and it was positively like a bellows, just really pumping, like such an active midsection. But we lose that as we get older for all sorts of reasons. But from that, when I put my hands on my body, I always feel this kind of ability to check in, like, how are you, Lucy? Or how are you, body? And so it can be that as well, like tuning in, checking in. Something I once heard was checking out your internal landscape, like what's going on. And if our organs could speak to us, you know, what are they saying? And so that's really where it begins. And it could be as simple as that. And then I see people lose tension, their breath becomes deeper and easier. And to be honest, I've cried many a time just doing that. And also my clients will feel quite moved, because it can be quite profound to be still, to allow yourself to pause amidst all the things that we can seemingly want to do or feel like we need to do. And then it might be to move into some simple kind of yoga-based movement, but really it's just kind of my own take on what would be useful. It comes from being me, it comes from dance, it comes from yoga, it comes from personal training, all sorts of things to just open up the body a little bit more. And then from that place, we can move into talking. And then the talking can just go into all sorts of beautiful tangents. Some people will say sorry if they get emotional, and I'll be like, there's no need to apologise. Like, it's all valid. Like, let's witness what's coming up, you know, witnessing without judgment.
It's beautiful to even listen to that process, Lucy. And part of what I'm thinking about is how grounded you have to be as a mother care supporter practitioner in your own body to be able to hold space for that. Could you talk about how that feels as somebody on the receiving end of working with a mother, what that experience is like, and how you hold yourself through that work? I want to pause here for a moment, because if this conversation is resonating, it's likely speaking to something deeper. Over the last few years, my work has evolved into what I now call the Reclaimed Motherhood Method, a compassion-led framework for understanding motherhood as a rite of passage, rather than something mothers simply need to cope with or perform better. This method is for practitioners who support mothers, therapists, doulas, clinicians, coaches, who can feel that the existing models don't quite hold the emotional, identity-shifting reality of motherhood. If you find yourself carrying the work home, feeling over-responsible, or quietly wishing for a more embodied, sustainable way to support mothers, I've opened a waitlist where I'll be sharing more as this work unfolds. You can join the Reclaimed Motherhood Method waitlist via the link in the show notes. And for now, simply know you're not alone in sensing that there's a different way.
Yes. Gosh, I love your questions. Thank you for what you said. It feels really lovely to share with you as well, kind of the process, and I appreciate you being so receptive to it. Yeah, so it is important to feel grounded and connected to myself. And I think it probably helps to say, before I go into this, there are times when, due to stuff in my personal life, I cannot hold space for someone else. So I've had to cancel. And I think this is really interesting to go into to greater or lesser degree, because some people will feel bad for cancelling and see themselves as unreliable. But what is really lovely is the clients that I've had to cancel on over the years have said to me, I've learned from you, Lucy, that you don't always have to push on through. And I love that you give yourself grace. And like, I do think it's quite a toxic masculine energy potentially that goes, you're so unreliable, I'm not going to work with you again, that kind of thing. It's totally fucking inhuman, really, because stuff comes up. I'm a mum. I have to hold space for my daughter. There's any number of reasons. And of course, sometimes I can push on, let's say. I can give Matilda to, say, my mum, but not always. And I have to fucking be there for her. But when I am holding space for clients, it's such an honor. It's such a privilege. I love doing it so much. I can't not do the work I do because it's just so important, I feel. I make sure that I've had space to be myself, to be in my body, to not be too kind of up in my head, say. Ideally, I would have a walk in nature, potentially, beforehand. I don't always get to do that, though, but I just make sure that I have a lot of quiet time so that I'm able to provide and be that person to listen, to really, really listen, because listening is such an underrated skill. I'm sure you know as a coach in this space how it's so important to listen patiently to see what unfolds. And some people say, sorry, I'm rambling. And I'm like, no, I'm here listening. You can continue. There's nothing that's too much about what you're saying. And then, yeah, really just making sure that I do the things that look after me outside of my one-to-one sessions or teaching groups, which is just not rushing. I just will not. And I love what I saw about your kind of desire to not rush yesterday on social media. Like, I will not rush. I will not pack my day with things back to back, because that just is I will do the opposite of thrive. Like, it just doesn't help me. So I go about my time very gently if I can. And and I guard my energy. So my boundaries are really strong with what I do, with who I spend time with and things like that.
This feels like a really powerful pivot for us to take within this particular recording, as it were, episode. Because I find it really important for us to hold space for the space holders in these episodes too, because there's something really powerful about what you've acknowledged around this as really feminine embodied work that we do when we do mother care. Yes. And that when we're able to give ourselves permission to step into our feminine, as the women holding mothers, we are better able to resource and model to the mothers that are often so, I suppose, constrained by the shoulds, the expectations of society, that it makes it hard for them to really place themselves. So it's almost like a permission slip when you work with somebody who does what you've just explained, Lucy: model, creating space for themselves, organizing their routine in a spacious manner, and acknowledging their humanness in the times when they actually just can't show up.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know if you've had this, Kendra, but sometimes when I've cancelled on people, they've gone quiet and never come back to me, and that's fine. And I feel, in a way, not sorry, because that sounds like a pitying thing, but I'm like, okay, they didn't have the space to forgive me. I don't need that forgiveness, but I don't for a second apologise for what I had to do for myself, for my daughter, for my whatever, But I do think there is so much of that must do energy. And oh God, it was so huge when I discovered this. I can't remember where I heard it, but someone said to be reliable is a privilege. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. Like, basically, if you're unreliable, it can seem like a bad thing, but you might just not have, if you're a mum, for example, you might not have the childcare support that others do. If others have any number of people in the community who the kid could spend time with, that they trust, that they're content with, or a nanny, then this person can do something at the drop of a hat, but I can't. And it was just really, really validating when I heard that. To be reliable is a privilege. I don't think I've worded it quite right, but it really, really hit home with me.
Yeah, I can really hear you, Lucy. And actually, I suppose it brings up a curiosity for me around how we make this work sustainable. Because ultimately what I'm hearing, especially if we're thinking about this piece around self-advocacy and what you've really lent into as your career path, is that this is really strongly heart-led work that has come from a space within yourself that has seen a need that needs to be met. And part of what I'm curious around is if we are working with mothers around any number of things, whether it be identity shifts, birth trauma, burnout, self-advocacy, assertiveness, how do we still show up and make this work sustainable? Like, how do we safeguard our own well-being as practitioners, our own financial stability? It's quite a big question I'm asking you, Lucy, but
Yeah.
You've named that we're working with humans. How do we act humanely in this work but still take care of ourselves?
It's tricky. It is a great question. Again, it's tricky. And although it's slightly hard for me to admit, like I'm not doing great financially right now, I'm going to say at present, right now, that kind of thing, because I do believe it will shift. And I know now that there are lots of systemic things that affect that. And after an awful long time blaming myself and feeling really crap that it was my fault, I realised that it's not. And it's a very tricky balance, I think, between going with the shoulds of different sort of coaches or, God, I can't stand the word, but influences, you know, like I don't really tend to pay attention to so-called influencers, but certain things that we may have in our mind that we must adhere to, because there are times when I just don't want to show up on social media. Like when my boyfriend's dad died and we were kind of in the thick of grief, I mean, he still is because it's not been long, but I was just like, fuck everything else. It doesn't matter. So I don't care about the consistency that might be needed for the algorithm. And that's one of the challenges, I think. Like, I'm not saying that that's a must in order to do better. But I think it can be hard when we get these real human instincts of cocooning and shutting up shop and bringing up the drawbridge when other stuff is kind of asked of us, let's say. And I do feel that in the grand scheme is obviously fine to go quiet and do what you need to do and then tend to your marketing when you can. But it's a tricky balance. It really is. I find, and I sometimes say to people, like, I feel like I'm dancing with burnout again, because there are times when, depending on personal stuff and work stuff, like, I can feel quite exhausted. And having had burnout in 2023, like I can just tell when I'm sort of getting that way. So I then make sure I sleep loads and make sure my nutrition's good as much as possible and the cost of living crisis. But it is tricky. But I think what I have to remember myself, and I encourage anyone who sort of wants my advice on this kind of thing, is you have to look after yourself. Like, it doesn't matter if you need more sleep. You don't need to think, well, I shouldn't be that tired. Well, stress takes its fucking toll on the body. So you do maybe want a huge, great lie-in, and you don't need to apologise. And hopefully there are people who won't fucking scowl at you when you come down from your good lie-in, you know? It's important to make sure that we are able to give in the huge amount of striving and trying and getting ourselves out there that is required in this space as a motherhood care worker, let's say, or entrepreneur.
The sentence tricky balance really rings true. And equally, I think you named something really powerful, which is the recognition of something that we support our mums in being able to hold, which is the systemic nature of motherhood.
Yeah.
That we are working and living within a system that really ultimately doesn't support well-being, it doesn't support care-based work, whether that be as professionals ourselves or as mothers caring for future generations.
Yeah.
And it's such a significant piece that I'm working on within my Reclaim Motherhood certification, which is how do we as practitioners hold all of this? Because the balance then suddenly falls to suddenly feeling like we're failing, which is often the narrative our mums come into sessions around.
Yeah.
And yet you've named such a significant and important piece, which is, can I self-advocate and can I be open to receiving? Again, really tricky when they can feel like there's very limited support. But how do we have these conversations so community can be built? Which is why having you on this episode, Lucy, feels so powerful, because I think if I know anything about you and your work, community, honesty, transparency are really huge values of yours. And I think the more we speak about these things, the more people come out of the woodwork and go, oh, me too. And actually, I really resonate with you. And then we can have that community of mothers who are open and willing to receive support, but practitioners who are also resourced enough to give that support and be mothered and cared for too, because we are often mothers ourselves.
Totally. I love what you said there. Yeah, because, well, it's just a huge piece. And actually, when I spoke to Beth Berry for my podcast, who is just so amazing, and I love her book, Motherwhelmed, she said something which absolutely, like, if I can describe, like, it shot straight through to me like a dart. I love how much her words sort of landed with me / hit me. She said, you don't just receive, you can take. And I was like, oh my God, to take sounds greedy, but we fucking have to sometimes, instead of waiting. Because I know people in, say, like an older generation, I won't say who I'm thinking of, but they'll be like, they'll just wait. they'll wait to receive, they'll wait for someone to offer something, but like, you just sometimes have to take it. You do. And it's not selfish. It's very, very necessary. And I think that the receive piece can be so interesting. When I started doing burlesque a couple of years ago, it was really big for me to stand in front of the rest of the class and do a mini performance as we were meant to, and to be open to receiving praise and celebration. It was very, very uncomfortable. And I know it's because I was treated badly for so long that I wasn't prepared to take up space and hold, say, a pose and have people clap and whoop. And over the years, I've learned to be better at receiving. And another example was my boyfriend would say, would you like me to do the washing up? And I felt the need to host him, even though we'd been fucking dating for ages. And I was like, oh yeah, please, that would be great. Because it was me and him and Tilly, and I just needed someone to do something like, yeah, to help out. And he did willingly. And I struggled with that receiving because I'd felt very alone for a long time. So I think it's so interesting to unpick our feelings about receiving and any way, you know what I'm trying to say, like we may have resistance, that's the word I was thinking about, the resistance we might have to receive, because we might be a real leader in our life, but actually it's great to just let go and receive and maybe take.
Yeah. I so love that, Lucy. So maybe if I do a bit of a 360 back to mothers, and then equally include mother care supporters, those that work in the field of taking care of mums. Knowing the value that you place on self-advocacy, being able to check in and tune into what your body's asking of you, requesting, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to impart to our listeners?
It would just be listen to her, listen to your gorgeous body, because it holds a story and it will tell you. And I just feel like it's the greatest feeling and the greatest privilege to get to know ourselves and to be really in tune with our body at some point, to achieve that by some point in our life. Ideally, not in later life. Ideally, the earlier, the better. But yeah, to really listen into her, because it's really beautiful what you get to hear, that you get to sort of befriend and heal. Yeah. I think there's something so gentle and welcoming about what you've just brought there, Lucy. And if I can kind of add something that I'm holding as I hear those words, I suppose it's a recognition that motherhood changes us. And if we allow the invitation to be there and we tune into what is happening, wow, like this journey can be transformational. And equally, mother care work changes us in our own experience of holding mothers and being in often our own matrescence journeys ourselves. Yeah. And if we allow this work to change us and tune into it, wow, this work can offer so much depth. Hey? Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, Lucy, thank you so much. Thank you for your precious time. Thank you for the work that you offer. Could I ask you just to share how people can get in contact with you? This will all be in the show notes, of course, but any offerings that you have out there in the world at the moment, please share it with our audience.
Thanks. And just thank you so much. Like, I've loved your questions. I've loved the opportunity to chat, and you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. People can find me at Lucy Wylde Coaching. That's my website. So lucywyldecoaching.com. Also Lucy Wylde Coaching on Instagram and Facebook and Substack now. And my podcast is called Mums Fucking Matter. And if you are local to Reading in the UK, then I'm teaching burlesque more in person now, which is exciting. But otherwise, you'll find me online with different offerings and tips and things.
Amazing, Lucy. Well, thank you. So appreciate you. And I hope everyone listening enjoyed this.
Thanks.
Before we close, I want to leave you with a gentle invitation. If you're listening as someone who supports mothers, and today's episode has stirred recognition, questions, or even a quiet exhale, you might be exactly who the reclaimed motherhood method is being created for. This work isn't about learning more techniques. It's about understanding motherhood as a developmental transition, working compassionately with identity shifts, nervous system load, and emotional ecology, without burning yourself out in the process. I'm currently gathering practitioners into a waitlist as this work continues to take shape. Joining doesn't commit you to anything. It simply keeps you close to the conversation. You'll find the link in the show notes. And wherever you are in your journey, thank you for the care you bring to mothers and for being here.